everyone. My name's Scott Rosenberg, and today we're going to talk about crossing planes, integrating Backstage and Crossplane to create the ultimate platform magic. So a bit about myself, Scott Rosenberg. I'm the lead architect in the CTO office at TerraSky, a global solutions integrator. I've been a Kubernetes contributor for over 5 years and sysadmin for around 10 plus years. And my passions in life are Torah, whiskey, and Kubernetes, exactly in that order. Now, we're just going to do a bit of a startup here on Backstage and Crossplane. And if we look at Backstage, the official description is that it's an open framework for building developer portals, which is very important to note because people lie and say that Backstage is a developer portal. That is a blatant lie. It is a great framework for building developer portals. It's also important that it is a developer portal and not a platform. A UI is not a platform, it's an interface to your platform. And at its epicenter is the software catalog, which is the key element that brings together our, all of the power of Backstage. If we take a look at what it looks like, we have our software catalog, which has all of our different components in it. We have different types of components. We have components and resources and APIs and different types of entities within our software catalog that allow us to model out all of our infrastructure and different components and applications within our company. If we go into any of these components, we get different views, we have different tabs, different widgets all around it where we can see different links. We get relations, which is very important, where we can see the relations between any of these different components. We get direct access to technical documentation, viewing the source code, things like that. We have integrations with Kubernetes, with CI/CD systems in order to bring in any of this information. Another key element of Backstage, which is where a lot of people start with Backstage actually, is the software templates, with the idea of how do I create a good boilerplate, a good starting point and jumpstart kit so that someone, when someone wants to start a new microservice, a new application, whatever it is that they want to create, we give them a nice UI form above it, and they can generate whatever it is that they need. We can create forms with different types of inputs, whatever we want, yada yada. We can add in Git information, and we have a bunch of actions in the back end that when this gets run, it's going to, in this case, generate a Git repo, enable on it different, enable pages, dispatching of a GitHub Actions workflow, and it's very customizable. We also have API documentation, right, where we can actually get a good API portal here with visibility, be it async API, GraphQL, gRPC, REST APIs, whatever it is that we want, even SOAP for those that still live in the 19th century. And we also have documentation, tech docs, following the docs as code approach based on mkdocs, where we can take the code directly from the repo, any documentation that exists alongside our source code, and visualize it. This is, for example, the entire Backstage.io document site directly within Backstage itself, making it very easy to maintain and keep aligned with our code. From usage in the industry, we don't need to go through the list. It's large. It's used in all different verticals, companies of all different sizes. When you talk about adoption, 250 plus companies using Backstage according to the adopters. Public adopters, 72 companies publicly mention that they're building plugins. 6 companies offer hosted Backstage, and 10 companies provide consultancy and services around Backstage. This is all the public information. There's a lot more than that, but this is according to the adopters, the ones that have opted into that. From traction, it has very good traction. It is the 4th most contributed to project in the entire CNCF, and it's the 9th in the entire Linux Foundation. So it is a very mature project. There are over 235 plugins in the marketplace. I wrote 10 of them, but that's a whole other story. And now let's move to another key point, which is my personal passion as well recently, Crossplane. Crossplane is an open source Kubernetes extension that transforms your cluster into a control plane. It allows us to create our own APIs, our own abstractions, and easily expose that to our users through standard Kubernetes APIs. It really has 3 key parts. We have providers. This is what was showed with the managed resources that they create in one of the previous sessions by Stav, where they had the different resources of the principal identity, and we had the role, the IAM roles. Those are managed resources. And in the end, a provider is a controller and a set of CRDs that take my desire and make it happen. That is a provider. We have AWS providers, we have Azure providers, we have vSphere providers, we have Postgres providers. Anything that is an API, we can create a provider. Compositions and composite resource definitions, or XRDs, are our way of composing together multiple resources and creating our own APIs and providing our own abstractions. And finally, we have what makes it a much better tool than other things like Crow, for example, beyond that not being CNCF, is that functions allow us to, how we go and write our compositions, we can write any logic we want in Go, Python, TypeScript, or Go templating, KCL, Q, YTT, patch and transform, which is just standard YAML with a weird syntax. But we have all of the flexibility to really build our platform how we want to, with the power of full standard programming languages or with simple YAML and templating languages based off of our needs. When we build our own platform APIs, we have our wonderful Crossplane user, and what they're going to create is a claim. This is the user-facing API. This is going away in Crossplane v2, but whatever, don't need to deal with the small details here. And that claim, which is my user-facing API, in the end is a representation, it's an implementation or instantiation of the XRD, which is our API definition. Similar to a CRD, it actually generates a CRD in the back end. That XRD is tied to an implementation called a composition. This is very important because we follow software development practices that have been built over the years where we separate interfaces from implementations. We can have multiple compositions that go with one interface. So I can create Kubernetes cluster as an interface and have different implementations for Google, Azure, AWS, on-prem, it doesn't matter, and we can have that all through the same API, giving a consistent experience to our end users. In the end, the composition spits out managed resources that go to the cluster, and the relevant providers go and apply this. If we see a small example here, this is a SQL database where I have decided to expose to my end users DB engine, which could be Postgres or MySQL, what version they want, and size, small, medium, large. Very simple. They fill that out. This simple manifest creates a VPC, internet gateway, route table associations, routes, subnet groups, subnets, RDS instance, database, optionally applies DB schemas using the Atlas operator, syncs credentials to Vault using external secrets operator, and creates a service binding spec output. Thank you, AWS, for creating such a disparate system that I have to create 30 resources to create a Hello World application, but we can make that easy using a tool like Crossplane. Usage in the industry, again, used very heavily. 60+ companies are using Crossplane. 200+ companies are contributing to Crossplane. It's the 11th most contributed to project in the CNCF, and 5 companies provide consultancy and services around it. There is also one hosted offering from Upbound, the company that originally created Crossplane and donated it to the CNCF. Again, relatively very good traction as well, and there are over 420 providers in the marketplace, making it really easy to get started quickly. So why would I want to integrate Backstage and Crossplane? What's the whole idea here? So number one, Crossplane does not have an official GUI. People usually like to go to tools that have nice UIs. Clicky, clicky. It looks really nice. That's what sells to CTOs. And in the end, as DevOps practitioners, we don't use the UIs and we use CLIs and APIs because that's much more comfortable on a day-to-day basis. But not having a UI is a challenge sometimes for certain types of users. That's why inferior tools like Argo CD beat Flux CD because they have a nice clicky, clicky UI. Not that I have opinions on that matter. Backstage also lacks out-of-the-box discovery of custom Kubernetes APIs. There is a Kubernetes plugin built by Spotify. You could say it works, but it's quite limited. It works with generic Kubernetes resources, deployments, services, ingresses, things like that. The issue is that in today's world of platform engineering, where we're using Kubernetes as our underpinning infrastructure for writing platforms, and even things like Cert Manager that have been around for years, and other tools that are CRD-based are not handled well by Backstage. Backstage software templates also utilize a similar schema to XRDs. JSON schema versus OpenAPI schema, pretty similar to one another, but what we see people doing is re-implementing the same API in both systems. They implement an XRD, and then they create a software template to generate an XRD and end up duplicating their work. Anytime we do this with service catalogs, we get horrible situations, and nothing ever stays aligned. Backstage is a portal and not a platform, and both projects have high adoption. So the key integration points are automating software template management, automated ingestion of Kubernetes resources, visualization, and day 2 upgrades. So let's see a demo here. This is a standard Backstage instance. Nothing is unique here. Within this Backstage instance, we can see that I have only the out-of-the-box example Node.js template, and we have one component, again, out of the box. What we're going to do here is make a few small changes. So all I'm going to do is standard Kubernetes. Yes, because of time, we're doing kubectl apply and not GitOps like we should, but for the demo, it works. We're applying an XRD, a Crossplane XRD, to the cluster. We are also going to apply the composition. That is the implementation of that interface. Here I'm exposing the ability to create a database, specifically a Postgres database. When I come to the Create tab, which is for our software templates, immediately we have the ability to see PostgreSQL database. We can come into here, fill in the name and namespace that we would like to have. I can fill in the owner, who this component should be owned by from a Backstage perspective with a selector of groups and users. And auto-generated from the OpenAPI schema, we get a form exactly according to what I have exposed to my end users in the API. They get this software template out of the box. Now, we also follow GitOps principles because we aren't living in the 19th century, so we do not apply anything to the cluster. Instead, we take this and generate a pull request. Like normal human beings, we come to the UI of GitHub, we get a link to it, we can see the files changed, where we can see the actual file that was generated with a bunch of different annotations pointing at which system this belongs to, which owner, different Backstage terminology, really bringing these things together. For those that are used to Backstage, there's a cataloginfo.yaml file typically that we create. I hate that. And the reason that I do is that we anyways have to manage our own YAML files for Crossplane, so why do I need to manage another YAML file and start keeping them in sync? Instead, we can add annotations on Kubernetes resources and ingest them. Once I've merged this pull request, again, we follow good practices, so we're using FluxCD and not Argo, and that is syncing this down to my Kubernetes cluster. When I come to the UI back into Backstage, what we can see is that I go to my components, I still see nothing. All's good. FluxCD takes a minute to sync it. But let's take a look at what else we did when we generated that software template. We also generated an API documentation of that CRD directly within the platform with all the schema, with everything that a user could do. Again, because Backstage is simply an interface above my platform, it is not my platform. So I want to expose different ways for them to integrate. They can come here, they view the API, and look, we have a new relation. It's consumed by a different component. FluxCD synced it down to the cluster. The Kubernetes ingester plugin in Backstage recognized this and automatically created a component for us. We can see here different Kyverno policy checks. We can see Crossplane overview, where we can see the different status, how many managed resources, if it's synced, created. We can come to different tabs here and see the claim, the composite resource, managed resources, which providers it's using, things like that. We get all of this visibility. For those that like nice little graphs as well, we do have that. You can also view the YAML. Crossplane follows best practices and uses Kubernetes events heavily. So we also visualize the events here from the UI. And we also have the Crossplane graph view, as I mentioned, where we generate a nice little graph. I am not a graphical designer, and I built this plugin, so yeah, that's why it looks the way it does, but functionality, it works really well. The idea in general is when we build nice abstractions, we don't want to hide away or make the developer not know what's going on under the hood. We want them to not need to care about what's happening under the hood, but we don't want to hide away things if they want the deep dive. So that's why we expose this type of information. Now, what happens when I deployed 16.2 of Postgres, and I want to deprecate that in the organization. I want 16.7. So for this case, we're going to show an integration that we built with Kyverno, as well as the composition. We've applied basically a new XRD, and we've also applied a Kyverno policy that we'll see in a second. When we do a small diff here between the initial and the updated XRD, all we see is we changed the default to 16.7, and I added the enum value of 16.7 as well, right? Very simple change, nothing really unique. When I come to the actual UI itself, and that's the nice thing with demos, doesn't necessarily go the same speed that you talk. When we come to the UI, we fill in the name, we fill in the namespace just like before, and the important thing is that this auto updates on the regular sync, so when I come to versions, defaulted to 16.7 and 16.7 exists as well. So that's great for creating new resources. What's the challenge? Platform engineering is not just day 0. We typically forget that in the industry. It also means day 2 and how I do updates in a normal way. We made it so a developer doesn't need to care about YAML when he's creating it. How do we do that for day 2 as well? So here we can see the policy reports that they see from Kyverno with, hey, version 16.2 is deprecated and will be removed. Great, I gave visibility to my end user automatically that their component is deprecated. What do they do from this point? How do they go about changing this? And this is where we can use the entity scaffolder again, the same scaffolding tool with a small modification that instead of accessing it from the create page, we've embedded it into the component. We can do update of the manifest, the component is selected, this pulls in the new API that is stored in Backstage, overlays on top it the values from the Git repo, and allows the user to make any changes that they want. They have 16.2, they change this to 16.7. When they make that change, it gets auto-merged, or it creates a PR, they merge the PR, that makes any changes that are needed, and the Kyverno policies will come back to being good. Due to shortness of time, you'll have to believe me, but all is good. Let's talk about some of the key takeaways here, though, that are really important. Crossplane is a great tool for building up your platform APIs. A platform needs a good backend, and then it can have multiple different interfaces. One of the common ones is a UI. It can also be a CLI. It could be an IDE plugin, whatever we need. Backstage is a great interface above your platform. It is not a platform. I will kill anyone that tells me otherwise. No, I won't, but yeah, you're wrong. Integrating Backstage and Crossplane brings huge potential. Please do not implement the same thing in multiple tools. Build a good platform backend, and then build dumb interfaces that work above open API schemas that can actually visualize things to me through the Kubernetes API and things of that sort. Finally, Crossplane and Backstage are mature. They're highly adopted, and they are extremely powerful tools. They work really well together, and all of these plugins are open source. They're on the marketplace of Backstage. There are some people here I know that are using them as well, but test them out, try them. And the key, separate your backend from your front end and use CNCF projects because, yay, open source is awesome. So thank you guys, and enjoy the conference.